I grew up in a single parent home. My mother packed up my brother and I and left town one day when my dad was at work. And I didn't see my dad again for 37 years. So from the age of not quite 3 until I was 40, I had no contact with my father. I had very little even exposure to men. I had an older brother. He ran away from home when he was 16. By the time I'm 4 years old, my mother got sick the first time. She had a strangulated hernia, was the way it was described. I was home alone with her. She's in the bathroom screaming in pain. She's like, go to the neighbors, go get help, go get help. And of course, I was afraid. I'm trying to take care of my mom, and she's trying to tell me to go away and get help. Evidently, I did, or the screaming drew somebody. I don't remember that part. I just remember being really afraid that my mom was in pain. And that began a whole series of me starting to step up and take care of my mom emotionally, of being the adult in the family, which was, I mean, it was just totally a lifestyle that I had forever. I remember when I was in my 40s, I started into my own personal therapy. And in the process of doing that therapy and talking about my mom, I actually confronted her with that. You know, she would call me and dump stuff on me. And I said to her, I'm not your parent. And her response was, well, you always have been. And that made me really angry because I thought, you mean you did this to me on purpose? How could you have done that to me on purpose? Knowingly made me your parent as a child. So when you talk about dysfunctional relationships, I know what it feels like. My escape was school and church. I spent a lot of time at the library reading stories and imagining myself in different scenarios and think how that story would play out if I were the main character. And my favorite book growing up was The Boxcar Children. These kids have been orphaned, and they find they're 4 kids, and they find an old empty boxcar, and they set up housekeeping in there because they've been told that their grandfather is a bad man and they don't want to be taken away from each other. It's a whole series of children's books now, but this is the original one. And at the end of the story, the grandfather finds them and they find out that he's really good. And for me, that story was my life. I had to figure out how to fend for myself, how to step up and take charge, how to, not get food, but how to take care of myself in very practical and emotional ways. And not realizing all along that I had a grandfather in God and that he was always watching over me and that he was safe. He wasn't this big, scary, judgmental person that I had been taught he was. So that original story of the Boxcar Children really tells the story of my early life. I got married the first time when I was 18 and worked while my husband went to college. And 6 weeks after he graduated, we were both 21 at the time. We both graduated from high school at 17, not because we were extremely smart, but because the start dates were a little flexible back then in terms of when you could put your kid in kindergarten, and we got in at 4. We didn't do anything faster. We just started earlier. 6 weeks after he graduated from college, our first child was born, and I ended up having 3 boys. And then I'm going to go to college. So the whole time that I'm married, I'm back at the library. I'm trying to figure out, how do you do marriage? So I read tons of marriage books. We were both incredibly immature. After working with couples for 25 years, what I think is true is that the younger you are when you get married, the more likely you are to try to work out your identity in the context of the relationship. And as you're doing that, you can be really self-absorbed. And in that self-absorption, you can be dismissive, you can be avoidant, you could be overpowering. There's all kinds of ways that you can approach that. And that's where people often get caught up. When I was getting ready to start college, my husband decided he didn't want to be married anymore. Here I am with 3 boys. When he left, they were 5, 8, and 11 or 12. The youngest one started kindergarten within a few months after his dad left. The oldest one started middle school. He started 7th grade, which is, we grew up in Kansas, so that was the way the school system was. But my middle one got type 1 diabetes, all within a few months of that. So, I mean, I was going through hell. So it took me 4.5 years to get around to what did I want to do with my life now that I was a single mom. And actually, in that meantime, I married again and ended up separating from him. But there you have it. That's what happened. So anyway, I start into college. I do my bachelor's, master's, and doctorate all back to back. I have 3 boys to raise. I'm a single mom. So I'm like, all right, every class, every assignment I did, I tried to find a way to make it about something I could learn about how to raise boys. Because I grew up without boys around. I doing all this study on how do I relate to boys as a mom. By the time I got into grad school, which was actually in California, which is how I got from Kansas to California, as I went there for grad school, I wrote my doctoral dissertation on mothers and sons. I wanted to work with couples, and I would have much more impact by helping a wife understand her husband and a husband understand his wife than I could having them feel understood by me.